can take any more. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is, oh my gosh, I can't remember what day it is. Is it Thursday? It's Thursday, June 26, 2025. And Sadiq Khan is doing multiple jobs, but one of the jobs that he does and his main priority is not the mayor of London, says Charlotte. And I've got a breakdown from Charlotte about Sadiq Khan's main job, which is the leader of the C40 cities. And it's interesting because I've been talking a lot how local leadership only works for these other people. They don't work for their local or their local constituents that elected them. And that's a problem. That's a big, big problem. And I think that it's interesting because Charlotte shines a light on it. And I've been talking about it. And I thought, man, my audience is going to love this. The closer alignment with the EU is to keep our EV market alive. I was reading a piece by Dan McTeague, and I'm going to share that piece with you this morning. And it fills in the whole reason why we're pivoting or trying to pivot to Europe. Because if Europe is the other part of our car market, then it makes sense to continue making EVs because they'll buy them because they're all communists as well. But if California does, then it doesn't make sense for Canada to make EVs because California is not making EVs because Trump's mandate is the EV mandate is gone because Trump rolled it back and so on and so forth. California was a linchpin in their plan, and now they're trying to maintain their plan. And it's very interesting to watch. It's not good for us. We're going to get screwed on this. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can avoid this disaster, I guess, really, honestly. Marco Rubio and more Iran and more war stuff. The ceasefire held. I didn't see anything about anything with regards to Israel or Iran and weapons or bombs or weapons exchanges or anything like that. So very interesting that held. And there was more NATO news than Iran and Israel news. So that was, again, interesting too. I think I fixed the camera blur. People were talking about how blurry my camera is. And I was like, oh yeah, look at that. It is kind of blurry. Sorry, everyone. I didn't even notice. And breakdown of C2 by Runkle and the Bailey. And he does a great job of talking about the really, really concerning aspects of this bill. The Canada Poly Chat brought it to my attention this morning, and I watched it while I was setting up the show. And I thought, man, I've got to include this. So I've got Charlotte, I've got Runkle the Bailey on today. Not live or anything like that. I'm just using their stuff. So check their stuff out because it's great. But I think that it's super interesting that there are people out there who are looking at this and are as concerned as I am. And Runkle the Bailey is a lawyer, and he's kind of looking at the camera going, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty wild what they can get away with this bill. Access to your internet, access to maybe healthcare history just because of who your service provider is, your doctor, and the government could say, give us all your referrals, meaning psychiatrists or psychologists, and very interesting stuff there. And he speculates on all that and does a great breakdown. So very appreciative, and the link is in the description. And the last thing, the Trump Whisperer, they're calling Mark Carney the Trump Whisperer. Really? Seriously? Anybody? This is pretty wild stuff. I think that that's ridiculous, but that's where we're starting this morning. And NATO, what Trump did yesterday with regards to NATO, somebody Ruta called Trump daddy. And so there's questions about that. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we're talking about the Trump Whisperer, right? Mark Carney, the Trump Whisperer. I don't know, not with those teeth. Mark Nixon says, Carney says Trump doesn't want to annex Canada anymore. Oh, phew. I mean, we're doing it to ourselves at this point economically. We're destroying the country to the point where Trump's going to be able to pick it up for free. He's not going to have to give us anything. Just going to say, yeah, all right, Canada, fine. Says they talk all the time, says Trump is envious of Canada, says some call him the Trump Whisperer. Actually, the news reporter asks him that, and I think he kind of says no, but it's still pretty funny. Here we go.
President Trump tends to be A, transactional, and B, very personal, and sometimes he thinks, or maybe you know differently. Apparently, they say that you're the Trump Whisperer of the leaders,
I'm not
and
sure
that you're on texting, relations with him, and you're constantly talking. So, is he still saying he wants to annex Canada?
He's not. He's not. He admires Canada, I think it's fair to say, and maybe for a period of time coveted Canada. But
you've put that to bed.
Well, look, we're two sovereign nations who are discussing the future of our trade relationships, our defense partnership, which has been very strong in the past. How is that going to evolve? But again, I would say it this way: the president is focused on a series of changing bilateral relations. We're at NATO. He's been focused on making sure that all members, Canada included, of NATO pay their fair share, carry their weight. I think we are now doing that.
The commitment to spend 5% of our GDP rather than 2% of our GDP is quite a big commitment, and we'll get to that later in the show. We're going to talk about that as well. Here is the exchange where Rutte calls Trump daddy, and so context makes sense, but it's more funny when you don't have the context. But this is real life, so it's very interesting. Trump is behaving as the father figure in this analogy that he's using. And so Rutte just takes it to the next kind of logical conclusion. And it comes out kind of funny, but here we go.
I mean, we may do papers on it, Marco. Maybe we're going to do papers. I don't even know if you need them. They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
You have
get
to use
stuff.
strong language. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word. I mean,
He's referring to the F-bomb he dropped on live TV the other morning, talking about they don't know what the F they're doing. So here is somebody following up on the Rutte comment and talking to Trump. Here we go. Do you feel like they're Big Daddy? Here we go.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
no, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No?
He
did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your NATO allies, though, as kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that, but do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own?
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning, and I think they'll be able to, and I think they're going to remember this day. And this was a big day for NATO. You know, this was a very big day. They took it. One of the gentlemen said, you know what? We've been trying to raise the rate for 30 years, he said, 20 years, from almost the beginning. And he's been there for a long time. He said, until you came along, it never happened. What you did is amazing. It's been sort of an amazing day.
So there you go. He's increased the rate from 2% to 5%, and people have agreed, et cetera, et cetera. So this is all in line with the Big Daddy thing. So the White House just posted this meme. And is real life, right? Like, welcome to 2025. Let's just meme it out, right? Like, the whole thing. It's wild. It's absolutely incredibly wild. The White House is posting this kind of stuff, and it's not just Trump. Like, he's and Trump and the White House and et cetera are responding to the things that are happening, and the things that are happening are just bonkers. It's just bonkers. Here is CBC Watcher, and this is the Swedish Prime Minister, and this is at NATO as well. He says the most European country outside of Europe, line to Carney in The Hague. And so I think that it's interesting because just getting a foreign representative to mouth this propaganda, because this is a line. This is diversity is our strength. This is a slogan. This is not real. It's a slogan. Okay. And they want us to believe it. And the whole reason they want us to believe it is because our economy depends on it, because we've invested billions of dollars in EV cars, and we have nowhere to sell those EV cars because California is going to keep buying ICE cars, and nobody's going to transition to EV cars because California is not going to. So the United States isn't going to. And I'll get there in just a second. And so in order to keep that quote unquote dream alive, that golden goose that keeps laying taxpayer money to subsidize the EV market, which is like cars that aren't going to work for any period of time at all. In order to do that, we have to pivot to the EU market in order to export our cars somewhere, right? Because the EU will buy them because they'll be forced to, right? And so it's interesting. I don't believe it. It doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it true. It's a slogan to save their scam. That's what I think it is. So this guy's talking, and it's about halfway through. He says the most European of non-European nations, which again is not even a good slogan, because I don't give a shit about Europe. Here we go.
Anything else, including, an absolute explosion in trade between our two countries, led by great Swedish companies from AstraZeneca and beyond. Partners in defense, of course, we're here at NATO. Partners with respect to the Arctic, and then much more beyond. So it's a pleasure. We've got a lot
Extremely
to
good
talk about.
summarization, and as you always say yourself, Prime Minister, the most European country outside Europe. So
right.
it's great to have you here in Europe, literally.
It is good to be here.
Great. All right, great.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
It seems like we're watching actors saying lines or something like that. It doesn't seem like we're seeing genuine. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I'd repeat that line to, meeting another prime minister. Oh, you're the most European of non-European countries. Mm-mm. Dan McTeague says, my warning to Carney in today's Financial Post. So I was reading this and I thought, holy smoke. This whole European pivot. This is the reason why. This is why. Opinion, repeal the EV mandate, Mr. Carney. Donald Trump's pullback on U.S. EV support means the market there will dry up, which puts our own heavily subsidized products in jeopardy. So they're pivoting. So the waiver... earlier this month, Trump fulfilled a major campaign promise and struck a blow against environmentalists' governance in Canada, all in one fell swoop. He did this by signing a congressional resolution revoking a waiver granted to California by the Biden administration that enabled the state to set automotive emission standards significantly stricter than the national standard. So strict, in fact, that in practice only electric vehicles, EVs, could realistically meet them. This waiver functioned as a backdoor EV mandate, not just in California, but for all of the United States. That's because automakers don't want to be locked out of the most populous state in the union, but are also disinclined to build one set of cars for California and another for the rest of the country. Their only option would be to increase their production of EVs to the exclusion of gas and diesel internal combustion engines, ICE vehicles. Trump has argued, both during his 2024 campaign and since, that the waiver enabled far-left California to saddle the rest of the country with environmental policies that it never voted for and couldn't repeal. That view helped him win back the White House. But what does this have to do with Canada? Donald Trump has no power over our own EV mandate. The law of the land in Canada, though it was barely discussed in the spring's federal election, beyond a last-minute pledge from Poilievre to reverse it, is still that by 2035, 100% of the new light-duty vehicles sold in Canada, including cars, trucks, and SUVs, must be electric. It doesn't sound like Mark Carney's Liberals have any intention of changing course from this Trudeau-era policy, even though new EVs sold in Canada have been falling as shares of overall purchases. To stay on track for 2035, the mandate stipulates 20% of new cars sold in Canada next year must be EVs. Last year, just 13.7% were. And as Tristan Hopper noted recently, these sales are disproportionately concentrated in a single province. Of the 81,205 zero-emission vehicles sold in Canada in the last quarter 24, 49,000 were sold in Quebec. That doesn't bode well for a national mandate, and Trump's move further complicates the Liberals' EV mandate, which has always been presented as an investment opportunity as well as a chance to reduce global emissions. Our federal and provincial governments, particularly Ontario and Quebec, have bet very big on EVs dominating the future. Last year, the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated that public investment in EVs exceeded $52 billion. Much of that money has gone towards subsidizing the manufacture of EVs in Canada. So he's making the case that Carney must repeal the mandate. He's not stepping back and seeing the larger chessboard and the pivot to Europe as what it is, which is saving their bacon on this deal and trying to find buyers for those cars. And Europe will have the same mandates because they're the same people running Europe as they're running Canada at this point in time. And they'll have the mandate, they'll have the place to sell the cars, and Carney will be celebrated and the mandate will go through and we'll all be forced to have electric vehicles. And then they'll say that backwards old United States under Trump is making it so the world is going to burn or whatever, 2 degrees Celsius, 9 degrees Celsius, rah, 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 fear, fear, fear. And they'll say all of that in a bid to get the world against Trump. And jeepers creepers, I can't remember the last time that happened where we had a big world war against one country because they were the bad guys, right? Anyway, I digress, right? But that's the play. I think that's the long-term play. I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, that's what they're going to try. We'll see how it all rolls out, right? But Holly Doan, there's a little bit more NATO stuff in here in the money part. We're going to talk about the investment Canadians are going to have to make in the 5%, but we'll get there. According to Carney, it's nothing. Nil. Zero. Okay, sure. Anyway, Holly Doan says 13 pages of records are entirely blacked out in response to Blacklock's access to information, FOI, Freedom of Information request for records concerning contributions to the Liberal Party paid by any BDC employee or executive, including the chair. And the BDC is the Bank for Canadian Entrepreneurs. And so their execs are donating to the Liberal Party, but I think that they're like an NGO, or they're government funded directly, and that's problematic, right? And they're making sure that nobody can find out by giving redacted pages to Freedom of Information requests to newspapers, right? Try and find out the real information on that. But Blacklock says BDC invokes solicitor-client secrecy in censoring data on execs' donations to the Liberal Party, including chair, who is financial agent for the Chrystia Freeland's lost leadership bid. Records have been redacted. So nuts, right? Every time you think you got them, no way. They'll give you redacted records that don't show you anything. Very, very problematic. Here is Ryan Gerritsen. He's highlighting this, and it's just talking about how Canada voted Samadoun as a terrorist organization, but they're still taking advantage of tax breaks and nonprofit status in Canada. And the back and forth, basically, it's 3 minutes, so I don't want to show it because it's very long, and it boils down to, did you know this was happening? And the Senate leader says, no, but I'll bring it to their attention. And I don't think it was intentional. I think it's just the government doesn't communicate well with other elements of the government, and so they may not know. And Gold says that's not good enough, basically. Or not Gold, what's his name? Husaka says that's not good enough. So, right? So what are you gonna do? Maybe he's got a point, but at the same time, not good enough. So they both have a point. CTV News says minister calls for wartime effort to build infrastructure. Wartime effort. Gosh. And the Buckywell says, how about a wartime effort to clean the country of illegal immigrants who've overstayed their welcome? How about that? How about we do that? And how about we clean out our government of foreign interests? How's that? Here's the CTV News article. Minister calls for wartime effort to build infrastructure. Canada's Energy and Natural Resources Minister is calling for a wartime effort to build big national infrastructure projects as envisioned by recently passed Bill C-5. In a keynote address to the Toronto Region Board of Trade, Tim Hodgson issued a call to action to business leaders to, quote, bring your best ideas forward as the country attempts to retool the economy like it did at the end of the Second World War. Harkening back to a time when Canada faced such a transformational upheaval of the world order, I'm meaningfully looking at the camera. Hodgson reminded the room that 8 decades ago, instead of hesitating, Canadians came together to do great things. 8 decades ago. That's 80 years ago. 80 years ago, fellas, we all came together. What? This is not relevant, dude. 80 years ago, the end of the Second World War. Yeah, we've got to definitely all, get together like we did then, like our grandparents did then and stuff. What? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't resonate with anybody. 80 years ago, we all worked together, so we're gonna do that now. How about if the government stopped working against Canada? We could do that. If we had the policies of 80 years ago, it'd be easy to all work together because it would be very clear what we were trying to accomplish. But right now, it seems like all we have to accomplish is give money to Israel for some reason, give money to Zelensky in Ukraine for some reason, hate Russia as much as we can. Hate Russia. And what else? Give money to Gaza too, for some reason also, and Palestine. And who else are we giving money to? Everybody and their dog. I don't see Canada in the top 6 priorities for Mark Carney or anybody else, other than we really want to get EVs done and we're going to pivot to our entire economy serving Europe in order to do it. So we're getting the short end of the stick here. Back to this. Now we must stand side by side once again from coast to coast to coast, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. Okay. Industries, small businesses and entrepreneurs, said Hodgson, we need that same spirit today. The One Canadian Economy Act passed in the House last week and is awaiting first reading in the Senate. It must pass third reading before getting royal assent and then becoming law. A process that could happen this week as the upper chamber is expected to rise for the summer on Thursday or Friday. Hodgson says the bill will create conditions to get projects off the ground more quickly with the establishment of a major projects office whose goal is to give proponents one point of contact to make sure things stay on track, said the minister. They're creating new bureaucracy and they're resetting all projects which have been languishing for years to zero to maybe clear them in the next 2 years or so, maybe, under this new bureaucracy that's being built right now to make sure things get built. I do not believe it. Not for a second. Okay, not for a second. Back to this. That office will be a central coordinating point with the Indigenous Advisory Council to consult with Indigenous, First Nations, and Métis communities, coupled with a rigorous environmental review. So you make sure, if you own that company, you stand that bureaucracy up, right? You stand that agency up, and then you fill it with people who are going to be combative and not necessarily the right people to deal with to get these projects done, but they accomplish the government's goal of not getting the projects done, right? And so if you don't control this one agency, maybe companies can go to First Nations and get the approvals they need. Maybe they can't, but maybe they can. But in this situation, they certainly can't because you control the points of contact for the First Nations, right? You see what I'm saying? So I don't like it. It doesn't seem like a good idea. It seems like it's going to stymie and give full control to the federal government about everything. Everything is going to be nationalized. Everything is going to be underneath the government's agency of, what are they even calling it? To be streamlined. It's bullshit. It is absolute bullshit. It's just to put them under their boot heel. That's what it is. Anyway, the office will be central coordinating part with the First Nations communities and Métis communities, coupled with a rigorous environmental review. Hodgson said it will inform a single set of binding federal conditions for the project, said Hodgins. The goal is to expedite review and focus on how the project will be built as opposed to whether it will be built. Of course, how the project will be built is interpretive. You could say, how are they going to build the project? Or environmentally, how are they going to build the project? Or electrically, right? How are you going to build the project? Like, how are you going to plug the project in? How are you going to get that energy there? Okay, well, we'll do a 10-year study on the energy available at the site. Oh, well, you can't use oil and gas. That's no good. How's solar? Okay, 2 years later, we'll tick solar off because there's not enough sun in the wintertime. How's wind? Okay, you can't put up your own windmill, right? How are you doing this? And so there's a lot of ways that they can use the language that is kind of floating around to stymie it. And I think they will use all of those opportunities, right? The goal is to expedite, blah, blah, blah. Last Friday, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that he will be holding working sessions and public roundtables in Ottawa with First Nation rights holders on July 17th, and then Inuit leadership in late July and Métis leadership at a later date. That came after the Assembly of First Nations and National Chief Cindy Woodhouse, whoever, raised concerns about the lack of consultation, saying during the legislative process, Indigenous rights holders had been shut out. It's why we're starting with the launch of the process of this national building process is with First Nations in full partnership, Carney told reporters last Friday, using two literales for no good reason whatsoever. So I thought that verbal tick was done. Honestly, I thought it was done. Here is Runkle of the Bailey, and we've got normal playback speed. He's explaining why C2 is just terrible and has lots of very concerning things. And well, here's his stuff. This is 7 minutes in, but this is just one of the aspects of this bill that he finds problematic. There are lots of aspects of this bill that are very problematic, but he kind of zooms in. Well worth the watch of the rest of this video. Here we go.
Not even allowed to tell you that this has been requested. It's your doctor's decision, or your ISP's decision, or your bookstore's decision, or whatever else. They're the ones who make the decision about whether they want to fight it or not. So if your doctor doesn't care about your privacy or, whatever, they just won't fight it. Similarly, you'll note that this puts all of the costs on that person if they want to fight it, because then they're looking at, making an application, they're looking at hiring a lawyer and so forth. And so a lot of these service providers, when they get these demands, are not going to think, man, I really want to hire a lawyer and spend $10,000 and up to defend this person who I don't really care about that much. I'm just going to hand over this information. So we're not going to see a whole lot of reviews of these things. Maybe some big companies that are sort of privacy minded will fight these, but most of them will just roll over and hand over your information. So when that happens, there's a thing that a revocation or variation of demand, the judge where the demand was made may revoke or vary the demand if satisfied that it's unreasonable in the circumstances to require the applicant to provide that information, i.e. it might cost too much, or provision of the information would disclose information that is privileged or otherwise protected from disclosure by law. Note that the person has to fight this. And when they say privilege, the number one group that has privilege, issues is lawyers. It seems very clear that they thought about the notion that they would make these demands to lawyers in order to invade this. Now, when you think about this, this is insane, because I can't tell you when a client comes to hire me. I can't tell you when a client comes to me for advice. I just, but now they're saying, well, we wanted to do that. And if the lawyer wants to fight it, then they can, then they have to pay all this money. They have to go through all of this hassle in order to fight it. They're going to be able to get medical records with this. They're going to be able, lawyers will probably fight it because I think lawyers will have an obligation to fight it. But for instance, they'd be able to go to bookstores. They'd be able to go to your ISP. They'd be able to go to various sites online. Do you subscribe to a porn site? Do you subscribe to a site that maybe provides some sort of subversive literature or something like that? Do you subscribe to a site that provides religious education or religious information of some variety? One where you're taking a position, for instance, on the issue of Israel-Palestine. Any of these things the government could get information on, and these could be incredibly, incredibly invasive. Simply the fact that you have had, interactions with certain kinds of providers will provide a huge amount of information to the government that could very well be used against you. They don't even have to take this in front of a judge or a justice to get this, so it's not like a warrant. The police just do it when they think that they can, and you don't even get to know about it. Your privacy is only protected if whoever it is decides that they want to fight for it and to protect it. It's
crazy. It's crazy. It doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever. And they're tracking us. This is Echelon. Hold on, an Echelon scanner? I think that's an Echelon reader is discovered hidden in the back of a stop sign in the United States. Models vary, but Echelon is known for smart city technologies, including traffic management solutions. The surveillance state is coming in America. So they're checking to see, and you've driven over these kind of things where there's two it looks like tubes, like hoses, and you drive over them. They're counting cars. It's counting cars to see what the traffic is like on that street. And they're planning sometimes, if the cars are a certain number or whatever, they plan traffic calming ideas to put on the street. And so this is an Echelon reader. So there you go. And they're doing this in the United States, right? So people don't even see it. Because, well, how closely do you look at the stop sign? It's right. It's a signal. You check it, you follow it, you move on. You don't examine it very closely, right? Very interesting stuff. Holly Doan is talking again about the NATO commitment, 5% that Mr. Carney has signed us up for. And Holly Doan says, no new sacrifice is expected from taxpayers under the plan to increase defense spending sevenfold, says Prime Minister Carney. Defense spending that totaled $34.6 billion last year is targeted to surpass $200 billion annually by 2035. Don't worry about it. Budget. Who needs a budget? And don't worry about the spending. Okay, we've got it all well in hand. Credit card bill. Who needs a credit card bill? This thing's still working, baby. We're going out for dinner and lunch on this credit card here. Who pays for this thing, by the way? Pays for this thing? I don't even care. Woo! So, yeah, does that make sense? That's what we're doing. Bill or a budget. We don't need no record of where the spending's going. We just know that plastic is still going to swipe. It's still going to go beep and everything's going to be fine. You walk out of the store, nobody will stop it. Everything's good, right? No problems, says Mark Carney. Spending. No problems. I don't get the bill. Who gets the bill? I don't know. Not me. Danielle says sales have stopped. Ontario developers predict layoffs if cost to build doesn't fall. Well, bad news, everyone, right? Like, obviously this is not going to get fixed in the short term, and it doesn't seem like medium or long term either. Global News is reporting sales have stopped. A developer lobby group is renewing calls to introduce tax cuts for new projects as housing starts continue to slow, warning that if something doesn't change, tens of thousands of jobs could be at risk. So you thought the tent cities before were bad. Not so good. Table Salt says, the Liberals' master strategic plan is to move us away from the United States and towards Europe. We have 328 ports of entry to the United States, multiple pipelines, and a shared language. Almost none of that with Europe. And then there's an ocean in the way. So the plan is not viable. The plan is a crackpot plan to save their EV scheme. And I think it's going to fail. I think it's going to fall apart entirely. If any part of our system functions at all, this should collapse all in front of Carney. Like C2, C5 probably should have been a confidence no. So maybe I'm not confident that our system works at all. But after our system fails and they pass all of this stuff and we're forced to buy EVs in 2035, I'm sure everybody will see then that this is a problem. Oh, Crying with Mark is not a viable, fun show. Here is Give, Send, Go, and this is led by the Remanded. He is trying to get the money to challenge legally the BC elections, and what it costs, the cost breakdown is here. He wants to raise $80,000 ish, $10,000 for the initial filing costs, $30,000 to $50,000 for pleading and discovery phase, and $60,000 to $90,000 for court proceedings. So he's got $80,000 as the goal. And this is a little article talking about why he thinks that there's standing for this, why he thinks it's a worthwhile endeavor, and why he thinks that, the breakdown of what they've got and what's happened. And it's a little, I could read a little bit of it, but it's a little bit long too. So here's some of it. Citizen-led lawsuit into the BC election. They violated the Elections Act, so we're pursuing legal action. Help us defend democracy in BC. Legal representation. Kitchen Wells LLP has been retained to represent the case. Campaign purpose. Every vote is a voice. Every unchallenged infraction silences our children's future. We must act now. This initiative seeks to find a citizen-led lawsuit against Election BC officials for alleged violations of the Elections Act, breaches of statutory duty, and negligence in the administration of electoral processes. Identified violations and evidence through comprehensive transcription, tracking, research, and investigation of election coordination and administration procedures. We have documented violations and numerous irregularities. Elections BC has acknowledged certain violations while others remain publicly unannounced, unexplained, uncorrected, or unrecognized. Our findings have been compiled into a professionally formatted 300-page report combining 5 separate investigative reports. The limited interests demonstrated by elected officials in addressing these concerns provides additional justification for pursuing legal action. Violations 149, retention of election materials, 258, subversion of election by an official, potentially 2344, transmission of unauthorized materials or information, 260, offenses in relation to ballots and other election materials, 265, offenses in relation to election and other officials, and 277, complaints regarding contraventions of the Act. All violations and irregularities have been highlighted and referenced at length in our report, ready for legal action. Further updates or changes to be made once benchmarks are met. Democratic and Electoral Reform Committee. The current Democratic and Electoral Reform Committee lacks a mandate to pursue independent audits or accountability measures regarding election BC violations. Phase 2 of this committee's work will not address the 24 BC election until May 26, which raises significant concerns given that election materials have a 1-year retention period before being destroyed. Campaign funds. The campaign has established 3 key funding benchmarks: $10,000, $50,000, $80,000. These estimates are it's not an additional, this is a rolling total. So $10,000 for the initial cost. It'll be total $50,000 for the pleading and discovery phase, and then $80,000 for the court proceedings, including all of the previous costs. Like, that's the total all in. The estimates are based on comparable cases and legal advice. For reference, the Surrey Gulford court case, currently approaching its second phase, has incurred $35,000 in costs and is scheduled for court proceedings this fall. I should have been a lawyer. Darn it, missed my calling. Additional considerations: a second legal filing, temporary restraining order, emergency court order to immediately stop destruction of election material, and then about us, contact us, and legal disclaimer. So there you go. Interesting. I hope they're successful. I am not confident in our institutions. Our institutions are there to stymie citizens' ability to hold our elected officials to account. It feels like the judges and the institutions are on the side of the people who control the government, and the people who control the government certainly aren't the people we elected on our behalf. They may be the people we elected, quote unquote, but they don't represent their citizens. They don't represent their constituents. They're working for somebody else. Bruce says, only in Canada can China put out a bounty on a conservative candidate's head during an election, and our system doesn't even classify it as a foreign interference. If India put a bounty on a Liberal candidate, what do you think the response would have been? So CTV News is reporting, no evidence federal election was affected by foreign interference, says the commissioner. So when I say the courts and the institutions are corrupted beyond my doubt, I'm not kidding. Like, man, it's bad. And if only we knew how bad it really is. There's a lot of news that Pierre Poilievre's support is collapsing, et cetera, et cetera. Not according to Abacus. I would take everything all of the pollsters say with a grain of salt, because we're being manipulated at every level. But honestly, I don't think that his support is waning, despite the fact that he's not putting up any opposition at all. Like, I think since the election, he's done a very, very bad job at representing what people want. And there hasn't been really any opposition to what's going on with Mark Carney. They passed the throne speech. They passed the C5 with amendments. But still, they're not crowing about their wins. I still don't even know what amendments they passed. And it still seems like C5 is bad. And Elizabeth May was the only one to ring the bell on that. And people are talking, Runkle Bailey's talking about C2, and I don't hear any conservatives talking about that. So I don't know. I have concerns, but their support is 41 positive, or his support, Poilievre's support, 41 positive, 41 negative. So I don't know. There you go. Zero. It's a zero. It's